Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation today. It's entitled The Sinister Side of Board Games, and it is an honor and a privilege to be presenting at the Canadian Game Studies Association Congress 2024. Thank you so much for holding this virtually. Not many conferences do this anymore, and it's the only way I can participate. I'm a person with disabilities, and online access is the only way I can participate in events like these. Unfortunately, my university has cut off access to my research and my email account as a result of a very small-scale protest I conducted about the limited public health mitigations on campus for staff, students, and faculty members. As a result, I have lost access to my database. So I had to change and pivot to change my presentation because I don't have access to some of my database of PhD materials. This was obviously very shocking, and I wanted to just take a moment to read from my university's freedom of speech policy. And this includes this right of freedom of thought and expression inevitably includes the right to criticize aspects of society in general and the university itself. My university purports to offer an atmosphere free of intimidation and an environment that supports the free speech rights of those with opposing views. Nonetheless, I think we are all seeing that universities are not making good on that promise. What I'm going through right now is in no way, it's a very small example of the things that people who are protesting for Palestine are experiencing in a much more significant way. I wanted to wrap my arms around those protesters and offer solidarity. We are seeing encroaching authoritarianism in all aspects of life, including at the academy. And I'm really hoping that I don't have to read from this slide during the presentation and that the situation will rectify itself. But I'm not holding out a lot of hope. So I just wanted to start my presentation there. It is relevant to the theme of my presentation. Why did I want to study board games? Well, it actually starts here. And this is a quote from a content creator I adored years and years ago. This individual, and I've actually kept her name out of this just to protect her privacy and enable her to be safe. She created content mostly for solo board gaming, and we loved her, my partner and I. She stopped creating content many years ago, and she wrote me in response to an article by this same name that I posted on Medium. She said, "I'm not white, Vietnamese, and cannot pass as white. I'm not straight, trans, disabled. I'm not a Christian nor an atheist. I have been told I have no value to the board game community and deserve to die. I have been told if I have PTSD and I'm disabled, I should die. I put up with years of sexual harassment, and I gave up." This was the reality for a number of content creators I kept an eye on when I was just a hobbyist in the board gaming community. It was actually the stories like this one that promoted and drove me to study board games as a hobby and as a social space with a lot of pressures and a lot of barriers to entry. In this quote, the content creator was told, and I quote, "I don't really belong to the board gaming space." And this was an ally explaining to her, I needed to understand that they're just defending their own space from outsiders. She heard this from someone she considered an ally. She goes on to say, "Someone I deeply respected. Obviously, the feeling was not mutual. Because of who they were, I decided board games were not worth it." This is a story that repeats itself. Indeed, in the conversation I was having with this content creator, someone waded in. I'm just going to read a portion of this remark. He accused both of us of using a tactic, and this is a quote, straight from the left-leaning playbook, that has been witnessed time and time again across a variety of popular media, and it's sickening. He accused both of us of leveraging privileges based on identity for the purpose of personal reward and personal societal gratification. This attack on things like DEI in American universities and the attack on campuses across Canada underlines that there is not only encroaching authoritarianism, but individuals are deeply emboldened to wade into these types of discussions and attack. Today, I am a YouTube content creator contributing to a wonderful board gaming channel called Our Family Plays Games. I'm in the segment Our Family Plays Games Voices. It's the best thing I get to do all year. I contribute every couple of months, and I have too been on the receiving end of threats and vitriol. It is the price we pay as public scholars, knowledge mobilizers, and people existing in spaces that are perceived and in reality are preserved enclosed spaces meant only for white, middle class, and upper class males. My partner was actually conducting some research with ChatGPT the other weekend and decided to ask it who I was. To our great chagrin, ChatGPT knew. It says, I'm a notable figure in the board gaming community, recognized for contributions as a researcher and advocate for diversity and inclusion in the gaming industry. It goes on. One of the interesting things about this is my reflection based on current events about how little support there was institutionally for researchers like myself who decided to become public scholars, who wanted to mobilize their research out in the community. I've participated in what feels like innumerable podcasts. I've done all sorts of media in support of my research. My research was picked up by the New York Times twice and other media outlets, but it has been fraught with terror and a lack of support. You're asked to do knowledge mobilization for your institution, but there's no backing when inevitably you are targeted for abuse, harassment, and threats. Some of the people who sent me death threats had elaborate plans. In the case of one individual, he wanted me to be dropped naked into Alaska to be eaten by a grizzly bear. And by the way, I'd rather take my chances with a bear than with that individual making the threat. Team Bear. What I've experienced as a researcher really pales in comparison to what everyday hobbyists, people trying to access board gaming spaces, board gaming experiences, experience every single day. One of the things that got cut from my dissertation, and I'm working on a project to use this content now, hopefully getting access to my database once again, is the question, what issues prevent board gamers? In this case, I did a survey of hundreds of board gamers. What issues prevented them from participating in the board gaming hobby as much as they would like? The answers I got were really surprising and kind of depressing. There's still significant barriers for people who are disabled, people who are LGBTQ+, women, persons of color, Black, Indigenous gamers. The sector has so much work to do, and I want to continue the work that I've been doing, mobilizing this knowledge to help the sector become better. However, what I have experienced is an incredible marked uptick in hostility. These factors that you're about to hear from real board gamers, people who have, in some cases, in the vast majority of these cases, been board gaming for 11 years or more, are really, really sad-making and depressing. One respondent wrote this in. There are certainly particularly male-dominated spaces in the board game world that I do not perceive as welcoming, even if that's not the case. And that is a barrier to entry for me for certain types of games. Also, I often attend conventions on my own. I often need to play with people I don't know, and most often these are only men. I don't find this problematic, it is just that I find it harder to approach a bunch of men to suggest a game or something. Another respondent wrote this in response to what prevents them from participating in board gaming as much as they would like. In this case, a lack of trusted people to play with, and I don't want to struggle to find a group who are not homophobic and have similar experiences to me, queer, disabled, etc. Another respondent wrote this: discrimination, race, gender, identity. The culture is dominated by white men, and when you don't fit into that category, it can be downright miserable. It's also tiring seeing the entire hobby repeatedly propped up by these types of people, white men, because it perpetuates all of the problems, such as the lack of diversity and discrimination. My gaming experience would improve if it was commonplace to game with or play games by women, persons of color, non-binary, and LGBTQ+ folks. Everything is better with more perspectives. Another person wrote this in: bigotry, whether dressed up as racism, sexism, or queerphobia, is the single biggest obstacle to them board gaming as much as they would like. Another respondent wrote this: money, and the normalization of misogynistic sentiments from other players' hostility to social justice warrior types, which feels like rejection of equality and creating a safe space for me, hurt over companies queerbaiting and recanting on non-heterosexual relationships, and accessibility for my mobility impairments. For those doing the knowledge mobilization that your universities or colleges privilege, I offer you a caution. I did this work knowing that there would be harassment and threats, but I don't think I fully understood the scope and scale of them. I have vacillated between giving up entirely on my research, particularly in light of current events, as mentioned earlier, with some of the challenges I've had to accessing my own research. But there is a change in the atmosphere. Things seem more difficult and fraught than ever. I get comments like these: hey, dumbass researcher, just tell the underrepresented groups to design their own games. If they don't choose to, then maybe you should stop wasting time and taxpayer money doing stupid and pointless studies. This is comparatively mild. Again, there's a change in the atmosphere. Very recently, I had individuals on LinkedIn, men, calling me the C word with their full names and corporate affiliations available for anyone to see. There's an emboldened nature to these types of threats. People are not even taking time or care to hide their identities. Something has shifted. Be careful, be cautious. We're seeing a high level of fascistic emboldenment among key members of our societies in Canada and the US. Be careful, protect yourself. Make sure that there is no way to reach you, that your address is not available. If you ask your institution for help, in my experience, they will not give it. So with knowledge mobilization comes risk. With being a public scholar, in these times, there is great risk. As we experience collectively the slow creep of authoritarianism into every aspect of our societies, particularly within the academy, we're seeing it all around us. I keep thinking of this quote from Timothy Snyder of Yale University, who wrote on tyranny: "Do not obey in advance. Most of the power of authoritarianism is freely given. In times like these, individuals think ahead about what a more repressive government will want, and then offer themselves without being asked. A citizen who adapts in this way is teaching power what it can do. Be careful, be cautious. These are very difficult times we as researchers and academics are living through. Stay well."